What would it be like to be your best self every day, all day? Really great, right? Well, can you master your emotions? Stick around and find out. Bible News Radio starts right now.
So thou, O son of man, I have set thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore, thou shalt hear the word of my mouth and warn them from me.
Have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness.
Okay. Oh, that was funny. Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you to our show. You know, the Bible says a merry heart does good like medicine, and there's a reason for that. Because if you've ever been doing live streaming and you missed your husband's cue to go live, well, you got the opening look. There you go. Anyway, hey, welcome to the show, everybody. Glad you're here. I want to ask you guys, if you don't mind, to share this out on your Twitter account and your Facebook account and every other account that you can, because you can, just so you know. Because you know what? Tonight, you and me are going to learn how to master our emotions with my guest, who is an expert at doing this. And if you didn't read his book yet, you're going to want to read it, just so you know. But first, what we want to do is I want to welcome you. As you come into the show, I want to say hello to you, Melanie and Trey and God's Speech. God's Speech. God's Peach. God has a peach, huh? Anyway, Lystria and a whole bunch of other people. I don't know how to say all your names, but Jeffrey is there, one of our pillars of the community, just like Melanie. And thank you guys for coming in. Totally appreciate it. I'm going to look over here now at the camera, just so you know. All right. So, hey, you know what? We have a sponsor we want to thank first off, because without them, we would be a lot more broke. And so we want to thank Ariel Ministries for sponsoring our show. If you guys go over to ariel.org, you can use the coupon code Bible News when you check out. And you should check out and buy lots of stuff. Then you save 20%. And I am not your mom, Joe, but hey, if you want to call me mom, I'm honored. Mom is a high title in the world. Anyway, go over to ariel.org and use the coupon code Bible News. And if you want to get the book special that they have going on this month, all you got to do is go over there, find D.L. Cooper's Messianic Series. There's 7 books for only $32, people. Just so you know, how many of you can buy 7 books for $32 or dollars, if you want to be more appropriate with your English? But here's the thing. Here's the kicker. You can actually get it cheaper because you can use the coupon code Bible News and save 20%. So now you're calling me your grandma, huh? What an honor to be called grandma. I appreciate that, Joe. Anyway, you guys, if you want to get D.L. Cooper's Messianic Series, there's God of Israel, Messiah, His nature and person, Messiah, His redemptive career, Messiah, His first coming scheduled, Messiah, His historical appearance, Messiah, His glorious appearance imminent, and Messiah, His final call to Israel. All those books, all 7, you can get for 20% off when you go over to my Twitter account, and I'll retweet the actual link because it's kind of long and complicated. Or you can just go to ariel.org and search the website and you'll find it. All right. Also, I want to thank our pillars of the community. I love saying that. You know, I remember the day I came up with that. I was trying to think, what can I call people who actually support us? And the word pillar came to mind because I thought, you know, what does pillars do? They hold buildings up and stuff, right? That's what you guys do. You hold us up with your money. So, and not, you know, that sounded funny, kind of like, stick them up. Give me your money. That's what I'm telling you. But no, seriously. If you go over to BibleNewsRadio.com and you sign up to give us money, give us $25 or more because you love us so much, then we'll put you in our top secret Pillar of the Community Facebook group where you get lots of fun stuff and a monthly meetup with me and Bareface. And so I want to thank you guys for doing that. And last but not least, I want to tell you that our new Bible course, Stop Lying to Yourself, Your Secrets Are Not Secret, is available as well. If you're a pillar of the community, you get 20% off when you buy it. If you're not a pillar of the community, yes, we only give you 10%, which is what basically God wants from you. So we give you 10% off. And here's the thing. You can go over to my Bible News Radio pinned tweet, click on that, go watch the introduction video, which is 20 minutes, and you can download the sheet, and then every lesson has a sheet and, like, great stuff. And 15 things I've listed that you'll get from the course when you fill it out and you buy it from me, your sweet and lovable host. Okay? All right. So thank you guys for coming in. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to tell you who my guest is. Because you know what, you guys, I don't normally read all my guest books, but I read almost every single page of this book today because I just love the subject. And it was fun to read. And my guest is Mark. Mark Youngblood is his name. That's right. And he's an inner mastery teacher, facilitator, and executive coach. That's right, Mr. and Mrs. watching this. He's studied for decades, which means he's really old. What it takes to lead a successful and fulfilling life. One of his greatest lessons has been this: the power to change your world, or our world, to make it what we want, exists within each of us. And through these powerful insights, strategies, and life skills, the journey can be faster and easier than you ever imagined. Come and see for yourself, which is why you're all here. So, anyway, without further ado, Mark Youngblood is my guest, and he's here. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Stacy. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm gonna say it correctly. Stacy Lynn.
See, Stacy. Well, thank you very much. See, some people actually call me by my name. It's Mark called me by my. I appreciate that. Yes, awesome. I feel so good now. All right, so hey, I read your book, which I don't say to most people that I have on my show. I get lead questions usually, but you know what? There's a couple of reasons I wanted you to come on. Number one, I love the cover of the book. This is a great cover. Well, except you got a new cover, so you should hold up your cover.
Yeah. This is the new cover. Let's see if I can get it.
There you go. Nope. Told you a little bit more.
There we go.
Yeah. Isn't that a great looking cover, you guys?
Yeah.
All those colors on the face. Yeah, tell everybody a little bit about your cover and why you named the book. Because you could have named it anything. You could have said, hey, you know what, you knucklehead, you should stop feeling that way. But you didn't. You named it.
Why didn't I think of that name? That's an awesome name. I wonder if it's too late. Well, the cover of the book, I had to work really hard on it. If you've ever published a book, there's a lot that goes into getting every detail right. And the cover was one of them. And the first mock-ups I saw of covers, it was like, that has nothing to do with my book. I don't even know where that came from. So I went out and I found that image, because what I love about it is, as a metaphor, all those colors are like the rich rainbow of emotions that every human has. And we can't not have them. We're going to always have emotions. But hers are not staying on our body. Okay, they're drifting out here into space, which is what also happens, is that we don't handle our emotions well, and so we broadcast them out, and that is what is causing a lot of the hardship and heartache and unhappiness in the world.
Mm-hmm. It really is true, and I think it's clever, and I've only published one little book in my life. It's called 5 Successful Ways to Stay Depressed. I know, isn't that a great title?
Yeah, that's a great title.
It is. Well, in my picture, I went all out on the book cover. I got one of those smiley emojis with a sad face. That was it. Seriously.
Well, it certainly speaks to the topic, does it not?
Well,
yeah. Well, you asked about the title of the book,
yeah.
And what I ended up with, Dear Human, Master Your Emotions. Dear Human was actually a chapter in the book. And my publisher said, that is a great title, and you ought to title the book that. And so, it made a lot of sense to me, and we went that direction. But what I'm saying with it is, Stacey Lynn, we're born with all of these emotions and no user guide. And we're just kind of thrown out there and like, good luck. And I hope you can find a way to cope with and deal with all of this stuff. And I don't know about your upbringing, but in my upbringing, I think people sitting down and educating me on what the emotions are and how to manage them healthy. It was like, you do these and you don't do those. You do those over there and you're going to get a whipping. Mm-hmm. And so that's about the whole education we got.
Yeah, I actually read in your book a little bit about your story, which I want you to share a little bit. I mean, I can tell, I definitely know what it's like to be scared,
Yeah.
And I definitely know what it's like to have a parent say one thing, do another, and give you incongruent messages. So, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a reason I became a therapist, just so you know.
Right.
So yeah, I totally get. So yeah, share your story and give us an example of what you're talking about. I mean, I could because I read the book, but I want you to share it. So.
Yeah. So I was raised with a really difficult background. My father was a spare the rod, spoil the child kind of parent, and he was an alcoholic. And so growing up, we never knew what was going to get us a whipping, and it wasn't just a couple of swats. It was grab the belt and start swinging, and not really care where he was hitting us or how hard he was hitting us. And I would literally sometimes have welts that lasted days that were raised an eighth of an inch, and so I grew up with a lot of fear and an example of rage and uncontrolled emotions. And so, as they say, I had issues, and I was pretty darn messed up coming out of that kind of background. It builds all sorts of deep insecurities. And so this woundedness, this emotional woundedness, I carried into my adult life. And I was a little bit like a bull in a china shop when it came to relationships as a result, because I was like a wounded tiger, sort of like lashing out. Mm-hmm. And I had a failed marriage in my 20s that lasted 2 years. I look back on it, and what was I thinking? There was no way I was equipped to have a mature relationship at that age and with the kind of emotional baggage I was carrying around. And it was really painful. A lot of the things I went through during that time were really painful. And one of the things, and kind of the final straw that broke the camel's back, was that I was, when we're wounded, we try to be enough. We try to prove ourselves. Stacey Lynn, I don't know if you ever had that play out in your life or not. But one of the things we try to do is compensate for feelings of unworthiness. And we do that by, let me be good looking enough, popular enough, smart enough, rich enough, successful enough in the business world. Mm-hmm. And so I had started a business, and I was going to be a millionaire, and I was going to be so successful, and that was going to make me enough. And it didn't work out that way. Mm-hmm. It failed. And when the business failed, it was like the end of my world. It's what they call in psychology an ego death. Because about everything I identified with collapsed all at once. And that happened also right at the time I was getting a divorce. And I never imagined I'd ever get a divorce. That was never in the cards. And so I got to a point where I was so frozen in fear and not knowing what to do that I just had a moment where I gave up. And you could say I surrendered to God. And it was a moment of absolute in the pit darkness of, I can't go on, I give up, it's yours. And in that moment, it was like I was visited with this incredible flash of brilliant white light that in my mind, it was blinding. And I was overwhelmed with a sense of profound love and profound well-being. Like, dude, what are you worried about? Life is great. Life is fine. There's nothing at risk here. What? And I popped up. I was sitting at the time. I popped up, and it was like I was. We talk about being born again. I was born again. There's no question about it. And I was. All of life seemed like I'd never seen it before. The color of the sky, the birds singing. My heart was just expanding. And in that moment, I really committed myself to being the best human being I could be, and to embrace a spiritual journey, a spiritual development. And it led me to the career I have in executive coaching, and also life coaching and teaching these materials to the public through an online learning community. And writing books like this, where I can help people to learn about their own inner life and how that creates the life outside of them, and that you don't have to be a victim of what's happening in here. And so kind of out of my own messiness, I had to fix myself. I had to work on, how do I get through this woundedness and become a person that is the person I hold in my heart that I want to be. And the journey of getting there, and the tools I use and the processes is what I teach. You know, I've been there. And so I teach where I've been.
Yeah. Well, and that's, you know, as some people say, your mess is your ministry. Right?
Believe it.
Yeah. Well, it's really true. It really is true. Hey, I want to say hi to Rob and Dorothy, who came in, and Mia and Jeff. I think I already said hi to you, but I'll say hi to you again. Hi, Jeff. No. And everybody else coming in that I don't know who you are, but thank you for coming in, and I appreciate you guys sharing this out. Because, you know, this book, you guys, is really super cool. Now, Mark, you know, it's interesting because, you know, I think Oprah made it really popular to, or maybe it was, what's her name? Oh, I know her name. Wait, hold on. I'm not middle-aged. I have things going in and out of my brain. Wait, what's her name? Maya Angelou. See, I visualized Oprah in my head, but I think she was the one that Oprah always quoted, that said something. Oh, Barack Obama's back. Anyway, that said that you treat people how to treat you, but because you only know what you know, right? So you were raised in a home where your dad was very violent, and you know, in the book you describe, you know, him beating you. Well, basically what you just were talking about, but then afterwards giving you a hug, kind of like, right. Hey, that's like, you know, now Dr. James Dobson, for Focus on the Family, he would say, it's okay to spank your child, but first set them down and then explain to them why they're going to get a little swat on the butt. And then when you give them a swat in the butt, it's only gentle. It doesn't leave welts, which if you told me that story and you were a child, I'd be like calling CPS up saying, hey, this guy's been abused. You need to get him out of that house. You know, but back then.
Stacey Lynn, I want to say something about this, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Because my father was no villain. He had a huge heart. He was an incredible man in so many ways. Just like most of the people in the world, we're complex. You know, we're not all bad and we're not all good. And you know, he had very little emotional mastery himself. Mm-hmm. And he couldn't handle the stress and pressures and upsets that he was experiencing. And so he did two things. He tried to numb it with alcohol, which a huge number of people do. Right. Instead of dealing with our emotions, they numb. And the second thing he did was act it out, which is lash out and visit it on someone else. And so often it's the people that he loves the most.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing I was going to bring out, is that you actually talk about that in the book a little bit. You talked about how you realized when you were older that he didn't know how to do it, right? No. And a friend of mine always says we're a product of our own environment. And it's true, we really are, but we don't realize it until we're around other people. I'll give you an example. I was recently grading some graduate level psychology papers for a class on abuse and trauma, because I helped my friend out who's a psychologist. And as I was reading through the papers, what really struck me was how in every single paper, and I don't know any of these people, but how every single paper there was trust broken, and people were talking about how they couldn't trust people. In every single paper, because everybody had been abused. I mean, that was the whole purpose of the class. And yet, what I like about your book is that I think the paradigm you put in the book, you know, you have to take personal responsibility for your issues, how you respond to issues and stuff. Right. And I loved when you quoted Viktor Frankl, because I read that book in grad school, and I actually want to read this, because some of you out there might not have ever heard of Viktor Frankl. So I want to read this quote. And if you don't know who he is, I'm just going to read what Mark wrote. He was a death camp survivor of the Nazi Holocaust during World War II, and he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And this is what he wrote. This is what you quoted. He said, he wrote of the people in the concentration camp. We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walk through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. So that was powerful when I read it, like 12, 13 years ago when I was in grad school, and still powerful today, because it makes you wonder, and this is a great topic, because on the one hand, you have people go, well, how can so-and-so go through all of this trauma and then they have a successful, literally fulfilling, happy life, and I use the word fulfilling on purpose, versus somebody who, didn't go through any trauma and they're living life and they're alcoholic, drug addict, and they're depressed, How do you answer that?
Gosh, I don't know. That's a kind of a tough setup there.
Well,
it's not that I don't really believe that anybody is intrinsically, more noble or more saintly than another person. It's not like the person that had the trauma and then lives this fulfilling life is better than the person that's struggling. It's that those different people had different circumstances that led them to this point where one is a victim of what's happening to them. They feel powerless in the face of it, and they don't have the resources or ability to shift that and to come back to being their best self. The other person somehow found their way. And Stacy Lynn, your background, my background, very similar in the sense that we've talked to many, 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 many people. And nobody has a Facebook existence, which is everybody's happy, we're in love, and my kids are great, everything's wonderful.
Yeah.
That is not the way life is. Everybody's life is a mess. They got crazy relatives, they got fights with their loved ones, their kids drive them crazy, do stuff that they can't imagine what they were thinking. Everybody's got that kind of life. But what we've got to be able to do is to recognize that our response to it is what we have power over. And the people that...
Sorry, it's my dog. He's having a bark fest at the moment.
I was hoping it was the dog and not Bareface.
No, it's not. Bareface is going to kill the dog right now. No, I'm just kidding.
Take care of the dog.
Yeah, he's good.
And people have dogs that bark right in the middle of interviews.
Happens all the time.
So the point being is that, when you feel like you have the power to make choices about what you're going to think and how you're going to feel, then you have the power to create the world that you want. And that's what leads to fulfillment. It's only when you feel like you're a victim, that the things happening to you, I have to act out this way. I have to feel these emotions. I have to be depressed. I have to drink in order to not feel it. That's when people stay tamped down. Now, I'm curious, what answer would you get to that question?
Restate the question.
It was your question.
I know. I was kind of distracted by my dog, though.
Yeah. So the question was: you've got people who have all this wounding, and they thrive.
Right.
They're fulfilling, and then there's people who don't have that kind of trauma, but they're depressed and drinking and that sort of thing. How would you answer it?
Well, in the context, it really has to do with the attitude.
Yes.
In Viktor Frankl, that was his point, was that we have the opportunity to choose our attitude. And it's sad because, well, like for me, I was not raised in a religious home or Christian home, if you will. I had a very abusive mother who was not nice. I went through a lot of different types of abuse. But I think part of it, okay, I think some of it truly is temperament, though. I think personality, different temperament. I'm naturally a sanguine temperament. That's who I am. But like, yeah, my husband's melancholy, though.
Right.
You know, so genetically there is that. But I think that for me, I chose better. I don't know how to answer that question, except to say that the breezy Sheila's in the house. Hello. Except to say that well, no, let me say this, Mark. Here's the truth, okay? The truth is, living in my house growing up was very chaotic. But my role in the family, which, as you know, is assigned, was to take care and basically was to be the clown of the family, to be somebody who made my mother in particular, you know, feel better, okay, to make her happy, which never happened, but whatever. It was my goal, right? I excelled everywhere except at home, because that was where I was being abused. When I got older and I became a Christian, I started reading the Bible, and I understood that God loved me. And so for me, that was like the first interaction with actual real love that wasn't abusive towards me.
Right.
So I read the Bible, and I found a lot of comfort in that, and I found comfort in people who believe the same thing. But what I found myself doing in my early 20s was actually being very manipulative with certain people, because I didn't know how to ask for what I wanted. Yeah. And that's when I decided to get into therapy. And so that's when I decided to seek out help for myself, because I was like, you know what? This isn't working for me. And if I'm ever going to be able to be, you know, have the life that I want to be, then I'm going to get into therapy. And it was only in the safety of that therapy office, which, you know, a lot of therapists, you know, equate to a womb. You know, it's like, this is your safe place, you know, where I was able to learn to be angry and not have somebody leave, or I was able to cry and actually be comforted, you know. And I didn't always have to laugh. I didn't always have to, you know, make that therapist happy. That wasn't, you know, she wasn't there for me to take care of her. And so it took me a long time. I was in therapy like 15 years.
Wow.
But here's the thing, though. I also got married to my husband 25 years ago. And in that relationship, I had massive rage. So when you were talking about your rage in your book and the anger with your first marriage, I can totally identify, because I was the exploder. You know, I didn't care. I was like, whatever, you know, until we got separated. And when we got separated at 8 months, 3 years into our marriage, we got separated. My husband stayed with his sister. I stayed in our apartment. We went through therapy, went through marriage counseling. He went through individual. I went through individual. We did all that for 8 months solid. And actually, we were in therapy together about 7 years, actually. But for that 8-month intensive period when we were separated, that's when I learned how to basically do what you're talking about in your book. Because my anger almost destroyed my marriage. And it would have been my fault, because I had no idea how to master my issues, you know? Yeah. And so I give God the glory for that. But that's, you know, people, as that old adage is, you know, people got to want to change, first of all. But often people don't want to change unless, you know, the pain is too great, you know? Right. And having spent, for me, a lot of years doing counseling, especially with women of domestic violence and things like that, watching people go in and out of drug addiction, it's not easy. It's not easy. And this stuff doesn't happen overnight. But so that's my long answer.
Thank you so much, Stacy Lynn, for telling that. That's an incredible story. And my hat is off to you for having that sort of commitment.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. And, you know, the life you have now compared to the life of suffering you had before you did all that work, it made it worth it. But most people don't have the luxury of 15 years of therapy. And they don't actually, most people don't need that kind of support. And this book is intended to reach out to people to say that that we have suffering in our lives that is a result of our relationship to work, our relationship to our loved ones, to even to God, that we have things that we can do for ourselves. We don't have to go depend on someone else. There's tools and practices. And you were talking about attitude a minute ago. Well, let's talk about how that happens, okay?
Yeah.
We interpret the world. We never actually see the world as the world is. There is a world out there, but what actually gets to our brain and what we're able to make sense of is not that world, because we have to interpret it. We have to label it and make sense of it and make up a story about it. And it's when we treat that story like it's true that we get in trouble. And instead of, it's just a story I made up. And if I made it up, I can make up a different one. So a real common story is a drama story.
Right.
And you study drama story. And in a drama, there's three roles. There's the victim, there's the persecutor, and there's a rescuer. And I've renamed those. You know, there's the victim, and then there's the villain. And it's easier to think about who's the villain, who's doing something to you, who done you wrong, as they say, who's done me wrong. And as soon as I point a finger and go, you're a villain, I just gave away my power. And now I can't, I don't have any power to do anything in the circumstance. And the emotions that come up, which are really painful for most people, if I can't deal with them, which most people can't, they have to displace it somehow. And the way we displace it or numb it is really unhealthy. And one of them is to act it out on others.
Yeah.
Because what we're avoiding a deeper emotion I call a black sheep emotion.
Yeah, I love that, by the way. I thought that was such a cool way to label that.
Yeah, a black sheep emotion is the one that is unbearable and I cannot handle it. And it's usually shame, but it might also be grief. It might be fear. It could be anger. Everybody has their own emotions that are off limits. I can't handle feeling it, or I won't give myself permission to feel it. And if I can't feel that, then I got to do something to avoid it. And so drama can be a way to not feel shame.
Right.
Or like if I'm ashamed that I'm not lovable and my wife walks by after coming home, doesn't make eye contact, doesn't see me, and I go into she doesn't love me, or she's ignoring me story, which is a drama story, done me wrong story. Yeah. It's because it triggered the shame that I'm not lovable. But instead of coping with that and realize that's not a true story, I am lovable, I'll go into a drama about her and go, well, what a jerk. Well, I'm going to give her the cold shoulder. Or I'm going to go, hey, how come you ignored me? And really make her responsible for my inner experience. And no one is responsible for your inner experience. Your thoughts and your emotions are created in here, not out there. And so that's the shift that we have to make, is that the second we go into a drama story where there's a villain, if there's a villain in your story, you are hooked emotionally and you're being run by your subconscious autopilot. You're not in charge anymore. You're just being flooded by emotions, and you can't choose a loving, compassionate, wise, you might call it Christian response to the circumstance, where maybe you want your needs met, but you have to do that in a way that's loving.
Were you going to say anything else?
I was just going to hand it off to you and see what you were thinking about that.
No, that's actually very good. I just wanted somebody saying, am I the only one experiment? Tommy is saying that. Yeah, right, exactly.
What's that?
Values-based decision making. The villain is a nobody, a spirit of negativity. I'm just reading some of the comments. Shalom, first timer. Well, hello, first timer. Nice to see you guys. Thanks for coming in. Experiencing sound issues. Oh, okay. Wait, hold on a minute. I'm going to turn this up just for a second. Can I hear myself? Nope, I can't. Something's wrong with the sound, Randall. That's a bummer.
That is, because it's everything is fine on this end.
I can hear you just fine over here. I don't know if that matters.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing because this is being recorded. Well, the good thing is because this is being. Oh, you guys have the sound? Okay, so let's see. That's one of the benefits of live streaming.
Yeah.
Is your audience can actually can tell you. Okay, so those of you who can hear, tell the people that can't hear to refresh. Maybe if they go out and come back in, that will help. Right.
Yeah. So where we were, Stacy Lynn, in the conversation, is the first step. What are you laughing about?
I'm just laughing because you're bringing me back to my point. That should be my job, but that's okay. Go ahead.
That's okay. So where we are in the conversation is, so we're going to have emotional reactions. As human beings, we'll never be able to avoid having emotions. And the question is, who are we going to be in the matter of having those? What are we going to do with them? And you have to have some tools. You have to understand, well, what do I do if, as opposed to suppressing it, numbing it with drugs or other kinds of addictive behaviors, acting it out as drama. And some people can't bear their emotions to such an extent they'd rather kill themselves than have those emotions.
Yeah.
Or kill someone else because they can't handle how painful those emotions were. It can become, I make a bold statement, but almost all of the dysfunction that we have in the world is because people can't handle these painful emotions. And if they could in a healthy way, we would be able to be our best selves. I use a metaphor about our consciousness as a skyscraper, okay, a tall building. And our best self, our highest self, lives in the penthouse. And when we're living there, we're loving, we're compassionate, we're wise, we're understanding, we're strong, we're courageous, we're flexible, we're understanding. We're all of these qualities that make a magnificent human being. But the second we get triggered emotionally, we take the elevator down. And as we take the elevator down, we devolve, and we're devolving down to lower and lower levels of consciousness, and we activate the responses to threats that we had at that age. Mm-hmm. So if we were 4 years old and the way we responded to it was to hit, and I get triggered and my psychologically drop to that level, that's what I'm going to do, whether it's physically or emotionally. And so we have to be able to, number one, recognize that we're triggered and we're heading down. And I have a 3-step process. It's called max the moment. And max the moment means I'm going to maximize the moment of upset so that I can turn this upset into an opportunity to create a really beneficial outcome for everybody involved, the best possible interaction that I can bring. And it begins with recognizing you're triggered, and that's tame it. So you recognize you're triggered and you call a timeout in your mind and you head it off so that it doesn't act out. But you can't stop there because that's just suppressing it. And that just creates a whole different kind of problem.
Yeah, it's true.
You've got to continue through the other 2 stages, and it's tame it, name it, reframe it. And tame it is you stop it in its tracks. And in the book, I teach a technique that's called a neuro-linguistic programming, or a visualization technique, to literally let that emotion go so that it's no longer supercharging you. And that brings you then into the name it. Well, if you're emotionally charged, if you're triggered, you're in a drama story. That's the nature of it. If you're having frustration, anger, hurt, sadness, grief, bitterness, resentment, jealousy, if you're having any kind of emotion like that, it came because something outside of you triggered that, and you're now in your drama story. There's a villain out there doing something to you, and they shouldn't have done that. They're wrong to have done that. Well, you have no power now because you can't control them. You cannot control that circumstance, but you can control this person. So in the name it portion, the way that you gain power is you name the drama. You go, oh, I'm in a drama story. Who's my villain? Maybe my villain's my wife. Maybe the villain's the dog that's barking and it won't shut up. Maybe the villain is time because I don't have enough time to get things done and I'm feeling all this pressure. Maybe it's workload. Maybe it's traffic. It could be the weather. I've got a storm coming up here. Who knows if that's going to interfere with this? It could be any villain that is not complying to what you want. And so as soon as you go, oh, here's my drama story, in psychology, you would know this is called a disassociation, where you move out of the event and you observe it like you're outside of it. And this outward move gives you the psychological distance to be able to act on it and have power on it. But as long as you're collapsed into your drama, and I am my drama, and the drama's real, they really did do me wrong, you're just going to stay in it, and you're going to act out with force, and you're going to damage the relationship, and you're going to feel bad about it later. And it's going to be bad for everyone.
Yeah.
So the only way to bring more love into the world, only way to bring more love and light in the world is you have to take the high road in these interactions. You have to be the one that's going to bring the loving, compassionate, wise response. I see you smiling. Are you wanting to say something, or?
Yeah, no. Well, yeah, I am, but I'm also, there's people asking if they can ask questions, and
of course,
and I'm actually concurring with what you say, because just from a biblical perspective, or bias, if you want to use that word, I look at what you're saying as this is the opportunity for the Holy Spirit to teach us self-control, because this is ultimately what it's about. When somebody feels out of control, that like what you say, that's the drama. They're in the drama, right? Oh, you're a drama queen. I've been called that before. The irony of it all. But the funny part is that as Manny Boy, biblical principles have been proven by science to be the most effective. It's true. It's very true. But here's the thing. Most people, as you know, Mark, most people don't know that they can change, number one, or they don't want to change because they've been taught, unless the pain is great enough, they have no desire to. I mean, that's been my experience, what I've seen. And I wanted you to touch on the power versus force thing, because I thought that was so good. I thought, oh my gosh. So go ahead and do that. And then
go ahead. And I would love questions. If somebody has questions, I'd be thrilled to engage them.
Yeah. So if you talk about the power thing, and then when the questions come up, I'll write them down and we'll get to it as soon as we can.
So pivot to power, this is a pivot to power. And you have to think about the pivot to power as, if I'm in a reaction, then I'm going to act out on other people with force. And force is about imposing your will and dominating someone or something in order to have something go the way you want it to go. And it always creates damage. Force always creates damage. A friend of mine used to say, if you have to force it, something's wrong. And it's just basically a rule I live by, is to avoid force if at all possible. And about the only acceptable times is when you're keeping someone from hurting themselves or someone else. And that's a time when force is acceptable. But we use force all the time to dominate other people, to hurt other people. I mean, you live in Tennessee, so you're aware of the Carrie Underwood song about, I don't remember the name of it, Before He Cheats, I think is the name of it, where her boyfriend cheats, and so she takes her keys and she keys his car and slashes the tires and does his seats and smashes the headlights. Well, that's an example of force. It's like, you done me wrong, so I get to do you wrong. Well, that force is what is tearing the world apart. It's this choice to take the low road and damage someone else, hurt someone else because they hurt you. And even the silent treatment is an act of force. Yeah. And it is a cruel act. It's a dominance act. The pivot to power is to say no. When I respond with power, I'm drawing from my own love, my own soul, my own beautiful inner experience. And it's coming from a place that is striving to get an outcome that works for me, for sure, but it also works for you. And that it is empowered with love, with wisdom, with understanding, with compassion. so that at the end of it, we resolve whatever that was in a way where we are closer together.
Right.
So, and that's, for instance, when my wife and I first got together about 6 years ago, I was coming out of a bad marriage, not a bad marriage. It was coming out of a bad divorce where I was really hurting, and I wasn't acting very well at the time when I would get triggered by things. And so it ended up being clashes when we had that conflict, and we hated it because we were so in love and we did not want that to be between us. And so we've worked on all these tools and approaches and concepts so that if one of us gets triggered now, we do the pivot to power. And then when we go to talk to the other one, the act of resolving that brings us even closer. So every upset is a way to become more intimate, more caring, more understanding of one another, more connected. And that's the pivot to power. It's from force to power, from acting out in a way that hurts you or someone else to a way that is loving and beneficial to everyone involved in the circumstance. And you know, my life commitment is to raise consciousness on the planet. And what does that mean? That people become the best they can possibly be, the most loving, the most, all those things, the most wise. And these tools will get you there. They're the tools that have elevated me out of being a bull in a china shop to being consistently loving and living these very principles about 99.95% of the time. And I'm benefiting immensely because I used to suffer so much, and I don't suffer that way anymore.
Amen.
So go ahead.
Well, we only got like 10, 15 minutes left, so.
All right.
So I want to get this question in.
All right.
Okay, so Manny Boy, I didn't see your question. You said you had a theological question, but Babe Favor, she asked, I'm assuming it's a girl because it says Babe. She wants to know how you can overcome your emotions, or how she can overcome her emotions involving a miscarriage and a divorce at the same time.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, my heart goes out to you. That's a big load to have to deal with. But in dealing with all of your emotions, the first thing to do is to turn toward them. Instead of turning away and avoiding them, you turn toward them. And to do this for yourself, you have to become you have to love yourself. So in this circumstance, there are parts of you, aspects of you that are just in agony over both of these, feeling, I can't imagine the cocktail of emotions you must be feeling between those two things. Grief, loss, anger, resentment, depression, bewilderment, confusion. It could be a lot of things. But to turn within, and since this is a biblical broadcast, we're going to say, bring in the light of Jesus, bring in the angels, bring in whoever you can bring in to help with the love. But you have to turn in and you have to comfort yourself. And I call this an empathic soothing or console yourself process. And in it, you imagine holding yourself and you tell yourself all of the things you wish someone outside of you was doing. Now, if you can get someone outside of you to do that, to help you with the healing, fantastic. But most of the time we can't. But that doesn't mean we're powerless. We have immense propensity to heal ourselves by doing this, by turning within. And here's what I will literally do. I have two versions. One of them is the adult Mark. And let's say the adult Mark got really angry about something a minute that happened, and he's stomping mad about what happened. Well, I would mentally turn within, and I would imagine that over there is angry Mark, and he's stomping around, throwing his hands in the air, shouting, yelling, gnashing his teeth. And I just go, hey, okay, I get it. You know, this thing that happened, it really was just a dreadful thing to happen, and you're completely in the right to be angry. You have every right to be angry. And I understand completely that you're angry. And just that loving, compassionate response, that angry Mark inside of me, he just stops and he goes, yeah, well, it's not that big a deal. Because that's what the part of us wants. It wants to be seen. It wants to be loved. It wants to be understood. Yep. And that's really the healing light of love and compassion is the greatest healer in the universe. And when you bring that love and compassion to yourself, then you have the same sort of response you would if you were doing it for someone else. And the second version is to see the little boy Mark instead of the adult Mark. I see underneath the adult is a scared little boy, or a lost little boy, or a hurt little boy. And I bring him in my arms. And those of us who have had children, you know, there's times when our child is so inconsolable. They're just screaming, crying, thrashing around, and you're holding on to them like a greased pig and trying to hang on to them. But as long as you keep holding them, telling them you love them, it's going to be okay. You rub their back, and pretty soon they settle down. And a lot of times they'll just collapse when they're done and fall asleep in your arms. And then when they wake up, they go, put me down. Yeah. I'm ready to go. Well, you literally do the same thing to your own inner child.
Right.
And the healing, you're shaking your head like this is a familiar experience, but
no, it is. Well, it is. I was just going to say John Bradshaw actually coined that term inner child many years ago, and that was very popular within therapeutic circles. So I'm real super familiar with what you're talking about.
Yes. And so these are two tools I use every single day for whatever's showing up. And the third is the drain the pain technique, which is also in the book. You can actually download that chapter for free at masteryouremotionsbook.com. You can go out there and you can download that chapter on drain the pain, which is another kind of visualization. But the main thing is be gentle with yourself, love yourself, get out of story, get out of dwelling on the drama that you're in, change the conversation that you're in. And it's going to be the best thing you can do to help yourself. Yeah.
And see, I wholeheartedly concur with that. And I think it was, what's her name? Brenda somebody. I forgot her name. It's going to drive me nuts. Anyway, but there's this actually goes back to a psychologist, Dr. Brenda somebody. It's been a long time. Yeah. Anyway, but she asked the question in one of her books on attachment. She always asks the question, and to you out there, Babe Favor, who asked this about that, it kind of curtails on what Mark was saying. Is the number one question you can ask somebody is, tell me about the first time you felt comforted. Because if you can pinpoint that time and the events that surrounded it and what happened, then there's going to be a pattern and a trail throughout your whole life. Like, for example, I used to have clients. I had a client whose mom put a knife to her throat and, just tortured her pretty much. And the way that she survived that was because of music. And you know what she does for a living? She's a musician. She sings for a living. So she went to that place of comfort. So that would be one thing I would say too, is I would say, learning to comfort yourself. Because look, let's face it. Most people don't get what they need because we're taught, well, like you actually address this in the book, our culture tells men you can't cry. And yet, the irony of it all, you guys, is that biologically, the men that cry actually have increased testosterone. It actually makes you more manly when you cry.
Well, how interesting is that?
It's really true. And what's funny, though, is that, most people don't realize that. I mean, Jesus wept. Nobody called him a wimp, So it's kind of like, but the culture, our environment teaches us, well, don't do that. And so the exercise that you're talking about as far as the inner child, and going and comforting yourself, the very act of visualizing this, and this is the part, honestly, you guys, just be honest, I've had to go, really? Because this irritates me. I feel annoyed by this idea. I would much rather, have somebody hold me and comfort me, and I'd actually feel it in the thing. But the way God created our minds is that if we actually visualize it, we have those same feelings. And let me give you a case in point. Case in point, you watch TV, don't you? Of course you do. You're watching me on video right now, and some of you, when you've seen me cry, you've cried. Why? Because you're visualizing me crying, because you can see me cry. You're not touching me. You're not, feeling me in any sort of way. You're just seeing an image of me. but you somehow connect through that visual image. And so the power that God gave our brains to be able to actually visualize something, that's why all these visualization boards work that people are talking about. You visualize it, and you go through this exercise. It really does work. And you know what's funny, Mark, is you don't know this, but tomorrow my guest is Dr. Timothy Jennings, who is a psychiatrist. He wrote a book called The God-Shaped Brain. And we're going to continue this kind of conversation with him tomorrow and talk about his book, because he actually talks about similar things, except he just, he applies the scripture and, looks at it that way. But the principles are still similar because it's completely biblical and it's biological, it's scientific, and it's doable if people actually do it.
Exactly. And the very same part of the brain that processes the outer world out there is the same part of the brain that processes the visualization.
Yeah.
And that's why when we imagine something, we feel those feelings. So that completely validates what you're just saying right there.
Yeah, it actually does. I'm going to block that person. Ciao. It's a troll. Sometimes the sex trolls come in and, I don't really care for the sex trolls. They irritate me. I feel annoyed by those guys. Okay, so Randall, I know we have another show we got to get doing. How much time can we get? Like 5 minutes more? 10 minutes? I'm not sure what your clock is.
Boy, it's coming up the top of the hour. Maybe, 4 minutes if I shut up now and you continue.
Okay, so we got about 4 minutes, Mark.
All right.
All right. So I want to let everybody know again, Mark Youngblood is our guest here. His book is called Dear Human, Master Your Emotions. What's the website URL again?
It is masteryouremotionsbook.com.
Okay.
And that will get you to the book page. The book is coming out in a month, in September 5th. It's available for pre-order just about everywhere right now. And come back to the book page, because I'm going to put a link there with lots more resources for people that buy the book to be able to get additional study guides and things like that. Because my commitment, Stacy Lynn, is life can be great, but it cannot be great as long as you're constantly having emotions and living in drama stories where there's this villain here and a villain there and a villain there, and you're upset all the time. You can turn that around, and you can do it incredibly quickly if you just have a small number of really effective tools and mindsets and ways of thinking about things, so that you can claim the power, or what I call inner mastery. You can claim the inner mastery to say, I can think the thoughts I want to think, and I can feel what I choose to feel. And then that's going to lead to the behaviors that create a great life through being your best self in all of your interactions.
Amen. And amen. Amen. Hey, everybody, I got to tell you, I read this book, and I don't read most of my books that I promote because I just don't have the time to. But I want to tell you, there's so much in here. Mark gives you exercises on mindfulness, on how to deal with stress, on centering your body, on gratitude, on meditation, visualization. He already told you he's going to give you the drain the pain exercise for free. Trust me, it's a good one. That was so good too, by the way, I have to tell you. The whole emotional hygiene thing, the way that you did that, that was so good that he actually did that. Empathetic listening. Hey, Tawana, nice to see you, girl. Just a lot of different charts, a lot of ways to lay things out, and all that. And see, Mark, part of the reason it took me a long time in therapy was because I didn't go to somebody that knew this stuff. Or if they did, they didn't really actually teach me it, because I would have done this, but you live and learn and get somebody else.
But this $17 book is a lot cheaper than $250 therapy sessions.
Yeah. How to access the book about Drain that you just mentioned. Is that up on the website yet? Because I didn't see it last time. I know that the introductory's up there.
Yeah, so there's a button to click to get a free chapter of the book, and the free chapter of the book is Drain the Pain. And so it's...
it's in there. Okay.
Yeah, they're getting it.
Okay, yeah. You guys go to the website and then just click through there and you'll see it, because it's definitely I would get the book. Honestly, if you just go get the book, it's a great resource. I wouldn't recommend it if it's not. Now, it's not kind of a quote Christian book in the sense of like there's no scripture laid throughout it, but that's kind of not the point of the book.
Well, actually, you know, what I would say is that in terms of spirituality, the very heart of that book is to walk in the footprints of Jesus. Yeah. And that is to bring love and light and goodness to the world. And don't bring force, bring power. And that's what he did. And the commitment of that book is if you do what's in that book, you're going to be able to keep yourself in the penthouse of your consciousness and be your best self. And you'll get hooked and you'll start down, but you'll be able to stop the elevator and turn it around and get back up. And then instead of lashing out at your kids, you're able to be loving toward them. Instead of getting angry at your spouse and alienating each other and then being distant for a week, you'll be able to be loving and close. It changes everything. It changes your whole world.
Right. Okay. And the website URL again is what? They're asking for it again.
MasterYourEmotionsBook.com.
There you go. MasterYourEmotionsBook.com. Just go there. And yeah, you'll learn about becoming the difference between being a reactor and a creator, which I think is awesome.
Reactor and a creator.
It was really, really good, but we have to go, everybody.
All right.
We have to do Vicky's show now, just so you know. All right, so hey, you guys, tomorrow, 7 o'clock Central, right here on Periscope, we'll be talking about the God-shaped brain, and this is with an actual psychiatrist. So join us tomorrow night. Thank you guys for coming in. Thank you, Mark, for being my guest. Don't hang up yet. And you guys remember, be bold, stand up, and go with God because he loves you. He does. Okay, bye.